Put your hands up, yeah. To the floor,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
Come down, selector.
That's right. Come on.
You're about to get a look through law enforcement's eyes. The danger.
Shots fired, shots fired.
The tragedy.
A baby in the car, too.
And the emotional consequences.
That is a life-changing experience.
An NBC 10 investigation is looking at the alarming consequences of being a cop.
For months, NBC-owned television stations worked with the Fraternal Order of Police, surveying thousands of officers about their mental health. Investigative reporter Mitch Blocker has the results.
These guys might be armed, or at least have guns in their houses.
Philly Police Sergeant Andrew Callahan is getting ready to serve a warrant.
If somebody gets hurt, put them in the car in the front.
It's work that almost cost him his life.
They call it a near-death experience.
25 years later, he can't forget firing his gun to defend himself.
A lot of cops walk around, and I was one of them, saying, but it's not going to happen to me.
He says he won't forget his reaction. Sleepless nights and a depression, he says, led to a post-traumatic stress diagnosis.
All of a sudden, I started to have problems, and I didn't know what it was. I just literally thought I was cracking up.
He's not alone. Critical stress is part of police work.
You want me in or out?
In Philly, cops aren't only policing, they're taking crime victims to the hospital and burying friends and colleagues all too often.
Radio, give me a medic here.
I knew then it was time for me to step down because I just couldn't bury another police officer.
Philadelphia's former police commissioner Charles Ramsey retired when a fifth officer in 9 months died under his command.
When you lose that many people in that short a period of time, you get this sense of it's just not safe out there. You know, your life is constantly at risk.
Responding to trauma creates trauma. That's according to nearly 8,000 police from all over the country, nearly 500 of them from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. 78% told us they've experienced critical stress on the job. 68% say that stress led to unresolved emotional issues. 16% told us they thought of suicide.
They take that same baggage home that I take home, and I'm not doing their job 24/7.
Jason Dawkins grew up in the North Philly neighborhood he now represents. The state representative walked us through his district. In the last 6 months, home to 7 homicides, 22 rapes, and 138 aggravated assaults.
I want to make sure that there's some safeguards that's put in place for our community and for our officers.
So he's introducing a bill requiring all Pennsylvania law enforcement to get a mental health screening every 2 years. But right now, it does not include money for treatment.
How do you do it without money?
So I think there's nothing that can really happen without money these days when we're talking about the legislature. I think things that are important we find money for, and I think our officers are worth the investment.
Okay, thanks. Let me know if he goes back in the house with it.
You'll get no argument from this veteran cop. His experience inspired him to go back to school. He's now a certified employee assistance professional and counsels hundreds of police officers every year.
No cop should ever have to walk alone again.
One of the hardest parts of this reporting was getting police officers to talk about their mental health. 90% of the officers surveyed told us that there's a stigma that prevents them from talking about mental health. Statistically speaking, there is a real need for treatment. Last year across the United States, 140 police officers committed suicide. Live in the newsroom for the investigators, I'm Mitch Blocker, NBC 10 News.
Hey, want to welcome everybody to another episode of You and the Law Podcast Show. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, Virgil Green, and as always, the dude who's kind of cut his beard down a little bit, but still got some age on him. Goes by the name of Chief Swaggy One. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. Once again, you open our podcast with a hit, man, a little rat punch. That's okay, man.
No, man, it's all it's all fun, man. I think
we're the same age, man.
I think our audience, man, they get it. they enjoy that, man.
We're the same age, man. So I just want to say that. What's up, brother Gene?
But you know, good, man.
How you doing, man?
I'm good, bro. Good seeing you.
Man, I'm smiling ear to ear, man, because this is my dog, man. This is my man.
Yeah, absolutely.
We go back 35 years, man.
Yep. Yeah.
And we do, man. And you know, he's been there. He's seen my firstborn. I've seen his first person.
Only.
Stuff. Yeah, man. And but Gene and I met in the academy. We actually met during the hiring process. Had no idea that we were going to end up being lifelong, friends like we have. We've been through a lot together. He's amazing. You talking about what you hear here is what you're going to get. Gene rose up through the ranks, and I'm going to let him talk about it, but I just kind of want to let you kind of guys know Gene's an author, published author. He wrote a book. I know his first book years ago, and I know he's always writing and stuff. Gene is a very, very, very strong Christian man. He's got a beautiful daughter who is, I like to tell people this, man. If anybody ever says that a single man can't raise a young lady, Gene's there to prove them wrong. So he's my man. He's my man. We're real close. And, Gene did 30 years, 26, 27 years at Fort Worth. And Gene knew exactly, we talked about it. Gene knew when it was time to get to hang it up, hang up the gun belt. And that's why I wanted him to, we wanted you to be on the show to kind of talk about that. When is enough? When did you know that it was time for you to say, hey, I'm done with this career and I've got some other things I wanted to do.
Yeah. So Gene, tell us about yourself. Humphreys gave a little bit background about you, but let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are, where you come from, and.
Well, I'm not a native Texan. I still live in Texas. I live in Fort Worth, but actually I'm a native Wisconsinite. Born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Went to public school there. A couple universities. Actually a technical college, the Milwaukee Area Technical College, and the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. I actually started off in life wanting to be a professional musician. I wanted to be a professional French hornist. And that's what I went to college for. My first year in college was as a music major. I don't know if Hump is aware of this, but I was a music major, enrolled in the School of Music and at UWM. And it was the early 80s. And I was a classical musician. And it was a different world. There are a lot of blacks in the classical world today, but at that time, there weren't nearly as many. And in fact, I was the only black person on in the classical genre of the School of Music. And it was tough. My race created some problems for me. And I hate it, but I didn't hang in there. I dropped out after a year. It was just real tough. It was real tough, and I hired on with the Milwaukee Police Department as a sort of it's called a police aide, but it's a police apprentice. So that's where I got a taste of police work as a civilian, uniformed personnel, working in different areas of the department. I worked in Vice. I worked in the ID Bureau. Did that for a year, and I just wanted to leave Milwaukee. So I left and I moved to St. Louis, and was working with a guy in a ministry, my spiritual father. I came to Dallas, Fort Worth to visit family, not planning on staying, but I ended up staying, and it's been almost 40 years now.
Well, man, it sounds like you definitely got away from the cold weather in Milwaukee.
I did, yeah.
Because I'm up in Minnesota now, and brother, I tell you, I don't see how people live up in Wisconsin and Minnesota.
It's pretty. I miss it. The snow is pretty and all, but I don't miss all the blizzards and the cold. And there's nothing like winter up north. but you can have the rest.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So when did you? So you and Chief Humphrey, y'all met in the academy. So, kind of tell us how that friendship came about, and
here we go. This is gonna be good.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I wouldn't be a cop today if it weren't for Hump, because I didn't have a car. And Keith picked me up. He was kind enough to do it. Sometimes I know it was tough, but brother hung in there with me. I really appreciate it. Got much love for Hunt. We went through the whole academy. He came and picked me up on the east side of Fort Worth, and made it through. I had a little bumpy experience there, and kind of bounced and came back again. And from then on, it was like a stair-step experience for me. It had some trying moments, but overall, I had a lot of success with Fort Worth. I had to do a lot of fighting. Well, I'm sure we'll get to that. Had to do a lot of fighting after I wrote my book and all. But it was just one, upward step after another. Shortly after I got cut loose, I got tapped to do a narcotics assignment, like a 21 Jump Street assignment. Went into a high school, spent 6 months at Southwest High School. But before that, I spent about 6, 7, 8 months just buying dope all over Fort Worth. So learned how to buy crack, learned how to buy heroin, marijuana, all over the city. Could buy everywhere except Como. If you're from Fort Worth, you know Como. It's a real tight-knit community. Everybody knows everybody, and if they don't know you, you can't buy anything. So I don't think I ever bought drugs. Maybe one time I was able to buy drugs in Como, but I could buy anywhere else. And then, did community relations for a while, published a little newsletter, got some notoriety there. And then I finally got over myself and started promoting. And from then on, it was just, to the hills.
And was successful in every rank that he reached. But I want a little bit of levity. Do you know why Gene couldn't buy anything in Como? Virgil,
No, what?
Virgil, you know why he couldn't buy anything in Como?
No, what did you have something to do with it?
No, because you can't walk up to someone and say, "Excuse me, do you have any green leafy substance I might want to take in?"
So
I can get a buzz.
You didn't have that look, and you didn't have that voice, huh?
No. Como is different. Como is different, man. And not in a bad way. I respect Como. I have a lot of respect for Como. It's a real tight-knit community. A lot of respect, a lot of love for Como. But you got to know somebody. My partner and I had we did a special assignment. Be very honest with you. What we were doing was the police department got word that a particular officer was tipping off some of the street dealers when they were about to get hit. So they sent me and my partner to do surveillance to see if this particular officer showed up. We didn't get to stay there very long because we went in this, I don't know if you know Como, but that apartment complex isn't there anymore near the rec center on Horn. Yeah. But we were parked up in there, and these kids came up to us and they said, "Who you here with?" And my partner made up a name. Made up a name. I don't want to get stereotypical, but made up a name. And they looked at each other and they said, you got to go. And we sat there for a minute, and all of a sudden, kapow, a rock hit our window, and I took off. And they were throwing rocks at us as we were leaving. You can't do Como. Everybody knows everybody there.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So I'm assuming, Hump, you stayed out of Como, huh?
No, whatever, man. Go and
I don't think you ever worked the West Side, huh? Did you?
I've never worked the West Side.
Yeah.
I never worked the West Side.
So let me ask you this. I'm a little familiar with Fort Worth. There was a mall that was right off of the interstate.
35?
35, yeah, right off.
Yeah, Seminary. Seminary South.
Yeah.
Yeah, Seminary South.
Yeah, back in I did a little stint there when I was trying to get on with Arlington University, and lasted maybe a couple of months, because this was probably back in 87, 88. So there was a lot of traffic coming through there then.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Gene, let me ask you this. So, we've talked about this, and we talked about if I would have stayed there, man, what a dynamic team we would have made. But you did it. You did your thing, and I think the things that you talked about your achievements and things like that. But kind of let's talk about, normally if you don't know Fort Worth structure, officer, then corporal, and then sergeant, lieutenant. At that time, it was captain, and then deputy chief and chief.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about when you start getting up in that mid-management range, lieutenant? What did you see? What did you see then? What was what was eye-opening for you? Number one, as a progressive young black man, and as a black man that became a mid-manager in Fort Worth Police Department, as you know, that it wasn't very receptive to African Americans, even when you and I started.
Mm-hmm.
So, during the time, you remember we were there during the Rodney King situation, the OJ situation, things like that. So when you got to mid-management, what did you notice when you look back over the years and you got to that level of a lieutenant? What did you notice?
Well, for one, it's very competitive, and especially at that time, I worked for as a lieutenant. My first gig as a lieutenant was on the East Side. I was what we called NPD, Neighborhood Policing District, like a precinct.
Yeah,
I was a precinct commander, and I worked for a friend of mine. Won't mention his name. You know who he is.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not mentioning his name for any bad reason, but just don't want to put people out there like that. But worked for a friend of mine, and it didn't go too well because it was really competitive. There were a few of us that were really ambitious and wanting to establish ourselves in our career and create a future for ourselves. People had vision. They wanted to achieve certain goals, and so everyone was trying to do their thing. We kind of butted heads, but it's really political at that level. It begins to be very political, and you don't understand. At least I didn't understand the importance of building relationships, building your cachet, your relationships with people at every level in the organization. Because don't think that your officers aren't important. They can break you. So you see how important it is to have those good relationships. You see how important it is to build a rapport with your teams, and also how important it is to have good relationships with those above you. But it got to the point where there was a lot of fighting going on and kind of lost focus. It wasn't fatal, but if I could go back over it and do that again, I would do it differently. You also learn how important it is to establish yourself in the community, which I did do very well. I did a great job of that. You also begin to interact with the political element of your city. It's important to maintain those good relationships because at that level, you don't really see how they affect what you're able to do and how far you're able to go. You want to have a good name. You want people to speak well of you. And so I'm sorry, just 1 second. And it's all coming in. But you begin to see politically how the organization operates. You begin to see the different networks within the organization, who's connected to whom, and how these networks work and how they affect and influence what you do and what you're not able to do. But honestly, my eyes really opened at the sergeant level when I was in internal affairs. Internal affairs is what opened the veil for me. That's when the veil opened and I saw the police, the organization I worked in. That was when I realized that I could actually be a lieutenant or a captain or a deputy chief because I saw everybody's work. And it kind of shattered that God image I had of people, and it humanized people at that rank and made me realize, oh, I can do this.
Right.
Yeah.
And Gene, it kind of, and you kind of hate to say that, but it goes back to, now I know if he can be a lieutenant.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, I mean, it does force you to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
And like, man, really, is this the best we have in the department? Is this what our department's headed? I mean, you do make those statements.
You do, yeah.
So Gene, as we talk about the topic tonight, recognizing law enforcement burnout, it's not so much about mental health, but obviously, that mental health piece is in there. But as a sergeant, did you ever, going from a sergeant to a lieutenant, did you ever recognize officers who were in that, who looked like they were in a position of burning out? And how did you handle that with them? Or did you ever experience anything like that in those ranks of a sergeant to a lieutenant?
I was a rabbit. I just jumped up the ladder. So I didn't spend a lot of time in patrol as a sergeant. Almost my entire time as a lieutenant, as a sergeant, was spent in internal affairs.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't deal with, I dealt with officers. They were stressed out when they came to see me.
Oh yeah, Just the IA was get somebody. Yeah.
They were stressed out. They were spiraling. That's how they were when they came to see me. But I did take that knowledge, because when I was in internal affairs, I did come up with an idea to early identify behavioral problems. And not just for discipline, but for intervention. This was before, this was before trauma and therapy was really the thing that it is today. I did see the need then. I didn't realize what I had tapped into, but I wish my supervisor at the time wasn't really excited about the idea, so it didn't really go anywhere. But I did come up with an idea to early identify problems in officers to address behavioral issues before they became more serious. And I did take some of those ideas and I applied them as a lieutenant and as a captain. But you do notice that, and I'm sure you guys have seen it as chiefs, that the most critical period in an officer's within an officer's career is when they're in trouble. If they're under investigation, you want to be really careful, because I don't know how many times you guys have seen it, but I've seen a few times where officers have gotten in trouble while they were on suspension or working the desk under investigation. So I have dealt with it. I've dealt with officers that have come to me and they have been suicidal, or they had a breakdown and didn't really tell anybody that that's what it was. They just needed to take off. You knew that's what it was, but we didn't really deal with it for what it was. I would imagine times have changed, but I have dealt with that. We did not have the resources then. We had EAP, and that you could send officers to, but we really didn't have the resources that were necessary to deal with officers and those type of issues.
Yeah, and I think that was going to be our follow-up question for you and Chief Humphrey. You know, what type of resources did Fort Worth have or didn't have back then? Because it wasn't something that obviously in the early 80s or late 80s that agencies really, some agencies did a good job with it and some agencies didn't. So,
you know, Virgil, Gene and I came along at the time when it was the suck it up era. It was basically, you know, stop whining, get back to work. You know, you're talking at the time that you didn't have FMLA. So if your wife or significant other was expecting, you know, you better hope to have the baby on your days off, and you might be able to get 2 or 3 more days after that. You know, it was that type of stuff. A lot of pressure on. So you know, it wasn't that you didn't have people to talk to unless you went and spoke to a peer. And a lot of the peers and a lot of the mentors didn't have that level of expertise. You know, and Gene can probably attest to this, man. One of the worst things you can tell somebody is, I know what you're going through. You know, and so basically, you know, that's what's happening, man. Quit whining. The department hear you say things like that. So people just shut down and they dealt with it. And so I think, you know, throughout law enforcement, that's what we've seen. And I think that's why we're in that position that we are now in law enforcement, where it's you know, it's exploded or imploded, and so now we're trying to catch up with EAP and wellness and peer support and things like that.
Yeah. So guys, so you know, and back then, you know, obviously Fort Worth, you know, crime has always been bad, but obviously looking at the culture of Fort Worth PD, how would you look at that versus, you know, Dallas PD or Arlington or any other? Was there a difference in what was going on in Fort Worth versus what was going on in Arlington, because they're kind of right close to each other, or even Dallas for that?
Yeah. Fort Worth, Thomas Wyndham came in, I think, 84, 85. He took over the department from LA, came from LA, brought his LA experience, his LA insights. And he, you know, he pulled the department into the 20th century, kicking and screaming. It was very much a good old boy police department before that. But, you know, he pulled it out of that era. Now, of course, that element was still there, but he did a good job of getting it under control. Brought some progressive elements in, affirmative diversity, appreciation for diversity was really important, and that you know, helped to bring in a whole batch of officers, me and many others, that probably would not have gotten hired on if it weren't for those initiatives, not just in the police department, but throughout the city of Fort Worth at that time. And pushed the department forward into, you know, community policing. One of the leading agencies in community policing. Probably not as progressive as some other agencies, like in some ways, like Arlington. Arlington, one of the things I really respected about Arlington is that it valued education. You had to have a 4-year degree or 120 hours. Is that correct, Hump? Is that right, Hump?
Yeah. You had to have.
You had to have a degree.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you had to have the 4-year.
Yes.
4-year degree. And, you know, and it does, you know, people can say what they want, but it does make a difference in the quality of personnel. It doesn't, you know, it makes a huge difference. And,
you know, Gene, we've kind of had that conversation on the podcast about the education part. And because up here in Minnesota, and obviously I think Wisconsin may be the same, you have to have a 2 or 4-year degree to be a police officer. And, you know, one of the topics that we had on the podcast previously was after everything happened with Chauvin up in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Does that, when you look at somebody who has that degree that's required by the state, but still you've got all these other things happening with that individual and others, does that degree really play a role in that person's decision making versus somebody who doesn't have a degree, who may go through their whole career not having those same type of behavioral patterns?
Yeah, it does. The studies reflect that. The studies reflect that officers, this is a generalization. It doesn't apply to every single officer with a 4-year degree, but on balance, officers with degrees with higher education have, fewer personnel issues.
Mm-hmm.
They're, more professional. The studies bear that out. So Arlington was more progressive in that way. But, Fort Worth it had its issues. But it was still a good organization to be a part of. I'm proud of my time there. I'm proud to have been associated with the Fort Worth Police Department. But yeah, I mean, there are many, many good organizations in this area, and Arlington was definitely one of them. I'm not just saying that just because that's where I'm with, but because it's just the fact. It's true. Dallas is in many ways as well. At that time, I think I would have rather have been with Fort Worth than Dallas. Fort Worth and Dallas. I think Fort Worth was a good place to be at that time under Chief Wyndham, and then his protege, one of them, Chief Mendoza, Ralph Mendoza, a very good friend of mine, took over, and he did really good with the organization. It took a turn after that, and it's kind of a different agency today. I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's a whole different organization, different style than it was when I was there, especially when I was coming up.
Hey, Gene, I want to get with the main topic. We know that you've been successful. You've mentored a lot of people. You've mentored me. You've given me some good advice and things like that. But Gene, when did you know? When did you know that it was time? Kind of walk us through what led you to that and say, okay, it's time.
Well, when you're fighting more than you're having fun, it's time to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the case for me. At the executive level, you're going to have your battle. You're going to battle. You're going to fight. And depending on really what your philosophy is, what your focus is, what your values are, will determine, and how you're perceived as well will determine how much you fight. And the organization changed, and my organization changed in 2008 when Meet and Confer was passed. It changed. It gave the larger association a tremendous amount of power, a very large megaphone, and it changed the political dynamics in the organization, and so completely changed that game. And from that point on, it was a battle. And I did it, and I battled, and I won some, and I lost some. And it got to the point where it was just exhausting. And I just wasn't interested in fighting anymore. It just started the passion, because I got into police work because, honestly, I needed the job. It wasn't the thing that I dreamt of doing since I was a little guy. I needed the job, and I applied, and I got hired. My passion came as I did the job. And at that, you got to have the passion to achieve that level. And I did. I loved my job. I love solving problems. I love helping people. I love doing good things for the organization and for the communities I serve. And the passion just started to wane because I was having to fight too much. And that's what told me it was time to go.
So was the fighting from within the
Oh,
organization?
yeah, it was the internal wranglings. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're dealing with that type of culture, go ahead, Keith.
No, I was going to say that, and I know we're having some technical issues, and it's not because of anybody here; it's just the system. But I know that I've always said that police departments cannot deliver top quality service to someone and tell people outside what they shouldn't do, but they're doing the same things internally that we're arresting people for and firing people for. And that in itself is heartbreaking that we can't get it together in law enforcement. That's in itself. And Gene, you and I spoke numerous times. So what I'm hearing you say, and people have said this to me, you have to make a decision. You either fight or you work. And it's very difficult to do both.
It is, yeah. Very.
And it wears you down. It wears you down.
It does. Yeah,
So
it
then
does.
so I'm hearing you say it got to the point where you did not enjoy, why it got to the point you say you didn't enjoy working. Is that what it was? You didn't enjoy going to work. It became a job instead of something that you look forward to instead of a profession.
I actually never stopped enjoying coming to work, but I didn't like what I was coming to. If you understand, I didn't like what I was coming to.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the job. I love dealing with communities. I loved helping officers. I loved doing those things. I did not enjoy having to come to the fight. That wasn't going away.
Yeah.
I recognized that was not going away. And so I decided to hang it up.
Well, and as we talk about the topic tonight podcast is, when recognizing law enforcement burnout. Did you see where others probably should have been recognizing that and they should have been kind of removing themselves, but they were in the mindset that, hey, they're going to stick around as long as they can, even if that means them making it difficult for others? Because as you stated, you just got kind of tired of that fight.
Oh, yeah, you got your retired on duty. Yeah. You got your retired on duty. And I followed, I took assignments a couple times from people that had retired on duty and was tasked with fixing the situation they left.
Yeah.
And one of those was what helped me to develop the cachet that led to my appointment to deputy chief. There are those people that stay for whatever reason. Maybe they don't want to go home to whoever is at home. They don't want to be just their name. And so they stay, but they're not doing their organization, the communities they serve, any much good. And they're there, and they're all over. They're officers, they're detectives, they're sergeants, they're lieutenants, they're captains. Sometimes they're deputy chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can do that and be a police chief. I don't know. It seemed like it would be kind of tough to do that.
Right.
But they're there. And because we are civil service, we have a lot of protection. So you can do that and get away with it. And I don't know what it's like today. I would imagine you still have those. In fact, I know you do. I hear about it. You still have those. But yeah, I followed a few people that were they should have left, but they didn't.
Mhm.
I had to come in and clean things up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey guys, we got a comment in the chat room from one of our loyal followers and listeners. She goes by it's Unity for Homeless. She's out of California. One of the questions she asked in the chat room, was it a fight for Black officers? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if she's meaning, was it something that you were dealing with Black officers, or was there something that you experienced as a Black officer that put you in that situation? Well, I forgot her name. It's Team Mom. So Team Mom, I know you're listening and watching. So please forgive me for not recognizing the name. So again, thank you for listening.
Well, yeah, I wrote my book in '96, and then I got, because the book was about Black crime in the context of the criminal justice, political, economic, and social systems of America. And so I got branded a racist. But because at that time we had a strong chief, people, didn't really mess with me very much. And then that was under Chief Wyndham. He passed away in 2000. Chief Mendoza took over. He did a great job. He did a great job of holding that element back. But in 2008, when Meet and Confer came and we got a new chief, that's when it began. That's when the attacks began. And they just really just drove that narrative about me being a racist. I'm a racist, I'm a racist, I'm a racist. And so when I would discipline a white officer, it was because I hated white people. But then, when I disciplined the Black officer, it's because I was too white. So that's just that's what I had to deal with. But because I was a strong advocate for, I had the East Side. I had the East Side, and I had the East Side, and then South Division. A lot of my constituents were Black, Hispanics. That's what they were. And I can't control where the complaints came from. A lot of the complaints came from Black and Hispanic constituents. So because I was an advocate for professional policing, the narrative was created that I was the savior of the Black people. And, I wasn't that, because if you look at my record, if you look at my my reviews, if you look at the complaints I dealt with, you'll see a very even-handed approach. In fact, there was an analysis done on my recommendations without my knowledge, and it proved that it was even-handed. There wasn't a difference in how I disciplined Black officers or white officers, but that was just the narrative that was created. That was part of the fight. That was one of the tools, the weapons that was used. So yeah, that was one of the things I was fighting against, and I did stand up for Black communities that were underserved, that weren't given the treatment that other parts of the city received. I did do that. I was a strong. I lived on the East Side as well.
Right.
So of course, I'm going to look out for the area I live in.
Yeah.
But that was, to answer the viewer's question, that was part of it, that I was perceived as standing up for the Black people.
As a matter of fact, I don't know, Gene, I'm sure Gene remembers this, when you referred to as Uncle Jones?
I was when I was a community relations officer, when I was a neighborhood patrol officer. I developed a rapport with some drug dealers in an area I had, and I got them talking to me. And I took that information and drafted an Intel IOC and gave it to the patrol officers. So one of the patrol officers went and told them, you think Uncle Jones is your friend, but he wrote this. He wrote this about y'all. And so I went out there and started talking to them, and everyone turned around and walked off. And I said, what's the problem? And one of the guys turned around and said, we know what you did. We know what you did. And told me about the IOC that I wrote on them.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that got investigated. At first, the precinct that I worked in didn't handle it seriously. They actually believed the officer. And I went to the police chief, and then he gave it to internal affairs, and they got properly addressed.
Yeah. Well, hey, we got a question in the chat room from Pam. She said, "What does meet and confer mean?"
Meet and confer is essentially a bargaining tool. It gives the majority police association the right to bargain with the city, to go negotiate with the city. It gives them, not the other organizations, if there is one, not the Black Police Association or the Hispanic, Latino, whatever it may be, or whatever the majority association. They have the right to sit at the table with city management and bargain for whatever every so many years. That's essentially what it is. And it also gives them power. It gives them a voice. I don't know if 183, chapter 183 of the government code, where this comes out of, gave them this right, but they did have a lot of involvement in the day-to-day management of the organization. In my opinion, way too much. And that's what created a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And that's why he said to Pam, that's why he said, and to the young lady from California, that's why he said it gave the unions or the associations a megaphone to scream louder. Gene, let me ask you this. Do you believe that a lot of your issues were based solely the fact that you were an African-American male in a upper management position? Do you think, because I think I know the answer to this, but do you think that if you would have been white in that position, do you think that you would have had a lot of the pushback and things that you suffered?
All right, I'll answer that question this way. Here's what a ranking board member of the Police Officers Association told me. Won't mention this person's name, will not do that. This is what they told me. They said, Gene, you're gonna have problems here because you're Black, you're smart, and you wrote that book. So those were the three reasons: being Black, I'm not saying this is what he said about me. I mean, I'm not dumb, but being Black, being an intelligent guy. I was a great writer, could articulate, could weave together a great, put the pieces together, put together a great story. Did a really good job. You put a case in front of me, I'm going to give you a really good review. And just can pull out all the really critical issues and put together a strong case for my recommendation. Did a good job of that. Could see through, could see through the issues. And then that book. Some people took the book and made copies of it and passed it out to people, even in the department, even outside and to some of the communities, trying to, taint the way people saw me. But yeah, I mean, if you take the book away, because there are other people in my organization, Black, really sharp, that had issues too. And that's just the fact. That's just the fact. If you're Black, you're smart, you're good at what you do. it's gonna bring you some. You're gonna have some problems, and that's probably more true in some organizations than others. I don't think that's the case across in every single police department across the country. I don't believe that, but in some organizations, you're gonna have problems if you're black and you're really smart and good at what you do, and you have strong values. You're gonna have problems.
Yeah. Well, hey guys, we got a comment in the chat room from Team Mom. She says, asked the question, do you think it was a way for them to keep you under control? Obviously, as you talk about the book, how that whole thing came out, and I guess her question is, was this a way for them to keep you under control?
Oh well, that's just the nature of the game, and it really, it's not just about being black. Officers, the officer community, and the associations, the unions, they're always trying to look for ways to control management, always. So that's just part of the game. But there is another layer to that, when you're black and you're considered what I would call counterculture. If you're counterculture, if you're not, if you don't have that traditional police mindset, that mainstream police mindset, if you don't have that mindset, you're counterculture, you're gonna have problems. Now, you're gonna have problems if you're white and you're counterculture, but especially being black.
Being black,
it's gonna create some problems for you, and not just with white officers. It will create problems for you with black officers too, because black officers, some of them, some will be vocal. Probably most of them will not be, because they're protecting themselves. They're not courageous enough to stand up and risk being, having to take a hit. They'll come to you and ask you to go to bat for them, and and sometimes you do, and you can help them out. Now, it won't stop them from talking about you like a dog, if you make a decision they don't like, but that's just part of the business.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just the nature. That's just the nature of the beast. You're going, people are always trying to leverage you, always. That's just part of the business. But when you are a black person and, you are perceived as a threat, yeah, they're going to look for ways to mitigate what you're doing, to stop you from what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Keith, we got another question in the chat room. I'll let you take that up.
Yeah, Pam asked when you wrote your book, and I remember your book signing and the introduction of your book and everything, but she was asking, do you believe that, did you anticipate any backlash?
Oh, I was young and naive. I was young and naive and being cheered on by a lot of people.
Was Hump cheering you on?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. I don't remember. I don't know that we talked about it a whole lot.
We didn't. I went to the book. I remember where it was, and I went to the book signing, but I had already left. I was gone in 95.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
when did the book come out?
96.
96.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew that Gene is an amazing writer, and we had talked about him writing a book, and so it didn't surprise me when it came out. I still have my copy of the book, and so yeah. So you're right. You were young. We're both young, and all you're doing is wanting to write a book.
That's it.
You're writing a book. You're not thinking about the backlash. Back then, you were young.
I got into policing, and I looked around, and I was like, wow, some of this is good, and some of this isn't.
It's bad, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, well, let me just kind of like tell this story here. And it was like betrayal. You have betrayed us.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
How dare you? How dare you? You're supposed to look like one of us.
Yeah.
Hey, Virgil, you must say this, and I don't have to call names out. You can put faces, but you actually have. I remember being in Fort Worth in my early in my career, and you would actually have black officers that would come to you and say, "Hey, man, you're making us look bad. You need to be quiet." You know, I mean, that was, hey, man, you too loud, man. You're making, you know, yeah.
You know what, man, and Gene, that's something that we've talked about it on the podcast, and it's something that we're in the future going to be talking more about because of those. You kind of use the word uncomfortable conversation in around, especially black officers. How much support do you have from people who look like you, and how much support you don't have from people who look like you? And the fact that Hump just said, "Hey, man, you need to kind of tone that down." You know, instead of saying, "Hey, we support you," but it's almost like they've got to fit into this box and this clique. And if you're not over here with us, you're gonna be on that island by yourself.
Yeah. You know, you got your talkers, you got your people that talk a big game.
Oh yeah.
When they're amongst,
amongst
ourselves.
Yeah.
Talk a big game. They're big and bad.
Bad. I'm not gonna call no names, but we both know a certain female that used to do all that talking. "Better not do this to me, do this to me," and then, "No, well, well, it wasn't directed at me, so I don't need to get involved." You know what I mean? So.
Respect to those black officers that had the courage and had the voice and would use it. Respect to them, and I don't castigate those that I understood. It's scary.
Mm-hmm.
It is scary. It's scary. And when you come home to your king size bed and your new car and you got a whole family that you got to feed, I understand having to weigh the possibilities, what could happen. Because you want that, you like going to Colonial to work that part-time job. You like that. You like that money. That Colonial money is good, and being there and watching Tiger and everything. I get it. I get it, because if you become an outcast, you don't get to work Colonial. You don't get to work Colonial. You don't get a lot of these part-time gigs. You might not make it in traffic. You may not get in traffic division. So I understand. And you pay a price, and you pay a hefty price sometimes. So I do understand.
Yeah.
My issue is just don't talk about people that do, and don't misrepresent people that actually do that and tell them, "Oh, they ain't nothing. They don't do nothing. They this and they that." And they got this whole list of issues that they dealt with. They can pull out receipts, but you can't. But they can pull out receipts and say, "I worked on this issue. I helped this person. I helped this person. I helped this person. And this division looks this way because of what I did. It didn't look that way before I came, but when I got here, when I left, it looked this way. And you are a benefactor of what I did."
Yeah.
Just don't give credit where credit's due.
Yeah. Well, hey, Gene, we're coming up on the last few minutes of the podcast, and I got one last question. When you became the deputy chief, when you look back at that book that you wrote, you said, 96? What had changed, if any, from that point in your career to when you came at the end of your career?
You mean in my organization or in policing in general?
Well, in your organization.
That's, you guys are chiefs, a police agency is what a police chief makes it.
Yeah.
So, that really doesn't have a lot to do with time or era as much as it has to do with that police chief's vision, their philosophy, their goals, their mandate, maybe even. So, I would rather not go into that, because then it becomes a matter of, it sounds like I'm criticizing who's there. And the current police chief in Fort Worth is a guy that used to work for me, actually in two areas, when I was the downtown lieutenant and when I was over traffic division. And I like him. I do have some observations as a citizen now, because I don't get involved. You know, I don't really hear a whole lot. I have people that call and tell me bits and pieces, but I don't really know a lot. But I am a citizen. I have seen some changes in some areas that I would like to see improve.
Mhm.
But I can tell you this much: that to me, it seems like and Hump has left recently, and you're still a police chief, correct? Okay. It seems like, at least in Fort Worth, that they've kind of scaled back from crime fighting. And I suspect that has a lot to do with, events, George Floyd, and those type of issues. And my guess is officers are reluctant to be aggressive. I'm not referring to excessive force, but to be necessarily aggressive in police work. I think also it's a different generation of officers. You have a lot of millennials,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're not as friendly as we were.
Yeah.
They just aren't, and I don't think they necessarily mean to be rude. But, this is the digital generation that's coming up in policing now.
Mhm.
And so, I walk into a convenience store. They don't speak.
They don't speak.
They don't look at you. They don't acknowledge you. Nothing.
Yeah.
I've tried to have a conversation with a couple of them, and they looked at me like, "Why are you talking to me?" And the fact that I was a cop means nothing to them.
Not even the fact that you were the deputy chief, huh?
Yeah, it means nothing. Yeah,
Wow.
it means
Wow.
nothing.
Wow. Well, hey guys, man, this has been another great podcast, and I think, Gene, we're having some Hump. I think we're having some audio problems on your end.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I can't. I don't think neither one can hear you. So Gene, he can hear us, man. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast, and
Thank you.
I'm glad Chief Humphrey reached out to you, and we were able to get you on. And
Thank you.
Good conversation about recognizing law enforcement burnout, and man, we gotta get you back on to talk more about that
Anytime.
book from '96. So yeah, I tell you, man, this hour goes by pretty fast.
Look forward to it. Appreciate it. Much respect.
All right, sir. All right, so you have
All
a
right,
good night, and we want to remind everybody to tune in. Make sure you tune in next Thursday for another episode of You and the Law Podcast Show. And if you miss any parts of this broadcast, you can check out the rebroadcast on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, as well as you can follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can search for You and the Law and check out our rebroadcast shows. And if you're not following our Facebook page, like it, share, and we definitely love more people to tune in and join us. So, Gene, it's been a pleasure, sir, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Get your hands up. Yeah.